You're listening to the Business and Life Podcast, where 7 days a week, proven entrepreneurs share their success stories, failures, and give you true value on how you can build a great business and an awesome life. With your host, Mike Olivas.
Hey guys, I'm really excited to have Ian Altman on the show today. As a CEO for 2 decades, Ian started, sold, and grew his business services and technology companies from zero to over $1 billion in valuation. Ian has since spent years researching how customers make decisions. His modern approach to sales and marketing is known for helping organizations around the world achieve explosive growth. A leading authority on accelerating business growth, Ian is currently recognized as one of the 30 global gurus in sales. He's a co-author of the best-selling book, Same Side Selling, and hosts the weekly Same Side Selling podcast available on iTunes. And you can read hundreds of his articles on Forbes and Inc. Ian lives in Washington, D.C. area with his 2 adult-ish children, a dog, and a wonderful wife that he does not deserve. To inspire us with modern approach to growing business and on the same side with our clients, please join me in welcoming Ian Altman. Ian, after that intro, I'm sure everyone's excited to hear from you. Welcome to the show.
Well, you know what? I hope at least a third of the audience is excited.
Yeah.
I don't want to set expectations too high, man.
Majority rules. That's right. Good.
Well, then I should have gone for more than 30%.
Yeah, exactly. You're not there. You're right. We're going to get there after. By the end of it, I'm sure everyone's going to be clapping away and being excited. So tell our listeners a little bit, maybe something interesting about yourself, Ian, and also where you're calling in from.
You know, so I live in the Washington, D.C. area in the Maryland suburbs. And what most people tend to focus on is that I started my original companies from zero and grew them to values of a couple $2 billion.
Wow.
And so now I travel the world helping people how to grow their businesses. And so it gives me at least a little bit more credibility than someone says, I think I have an idea.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that once you throw this $1 billion word out there, I get really excited. When I got the confirmation of you being on the show, I was really excited. I took a look at a lot of the accolades you've done. So, I mean, it's really exciting to kind of hear a little bit more of just some feedback on how we can get some great value to our listeners. Tell us a little bit about IanAltman.com, what it does, what you do for pretty much now after those exits.
Well, so the book I'm best known for is called Same Side Selling. The second edition is out now. If you've traveled at all, you've probably seen it in the airport bookstores. And it's all about how we get the buyer and seller, instead of being in opposition to each other, on the same side, working collaboratively. And if we do that effectively, then we get to the truth a whole lot faster. We can focus on value instead of price. And it makes it so that the notion of sales isn't a slimy feeling anymore. You can actually do so with integrity, which is something that shouldn't be that hard. But unfortunately, a lot of people are taught a lot of slimy techniques that we've all been on the receiving end of.
So it sounds like it's customer service meets sales to a point where everyone's just, there's a lot more, I guess, maybe transparency. Can elaborate on the same side selling, if you will, in terms of the actual title.
Well, so my co-author is a guy named Jack Quarles. You can probably tell from Jack's last name, Quarles. Jack spent 2 decades in purchasing and procurement. Yeah. And so what we talk about is what triggers these adversarial traps that pit buyer and seller against one another. And how do we get on the same side, really just trying to get to the truth. So what happens is, instead of focusing on what we are selling, which is when that happens, the seller falls into what I call axis displacement disorder. That's where the seller believes the axis of the earth has shifted and the world revolves around them. So instead of that, what we do is we think about, well, what goes through our client's mind? So I've done research with over 10,000 executives on how they make and approve decisions. And so everything in same side selling is built around, here's the way people make and approve decisions. So if the way you sell is aligned with that, then you're not showing up as someone there to sell. You're showing up as someone who's there to solve. And if the client doesn't have that problem, you don't have anything to sell them.
Okay, that makes total sense. And so who are your clients now?
My clients range from, I've got small, medium-sized businesses who I help. We've got a program called the Same Side Selling Academy that is a whole digital product, and I help companies who are multi-billion-dollar multinationals and everything in between. It's kind of interesting because as a keynote speaker, most of my audiences tend to be those larger companies, but there's a lot of gratification. If I take a big ERP company, and as I've done, I help them add $50 million in revenue, they almost don't care. But if I take the $2 million business and show them how to grow to $10 million in 3 years, you just changed a whole bunch of people's lives. So it's really gratifying in that middle level to help people really dramatically grow. And all of a sudden, when they say, wow, you know what? A year ago, 20% of my team was hitting their numbers, and it's a year later, and now 95% of them are. Or, we've got a number of case studies on our website of companies that, they were 14 million in the 3 years prior to working with me, they went from 14 to 17. The 3 years after working with me, they went from 17 to 109.
Well, I love that.
It's really gratifying to see, because I knew I could build my own businesses, but whatever, I've already done that. Now it's really satisfying to see other businesses grow.
Yeah, no, I have the same. I built some, sold some, one at least right now. Knock on wood, it's going through escrow as we speak, and it's fell out once. So we're going through the process, and I think I want to dive into your experiences, but also the differences that you might see between large companies and mid-sized companies. Do you see a lot of, let's say, relevance on the speed bumps that they have that have growth, or is it really day and night from a medium-sized small business to a multi-billion, multi-million, 10-time revenue kind of company that's trying to get to that point of, scalability and sell? Is it mid-size, big size, many differences?
Well, it's interesting, because I know a lot of your background's the B2C side. Most of my world is in the B2B side.
Okay.
And the B2B side, the funny part is the small companies say, oh, I can't compete against these big companies. They have a ton of resources. And it's like, I can never compete against them. My clients who are the big companies say, oh man, it is so hard to move and change, and we can't react, and we're not nimble. Yeah. I wish I was a smaller company. So the grass is always greener on the other side. That's just the way it works. But what I do notice is that there are a few key concepts that tend to resonate regardless of size. And if it's okay, I'll give you a couple of those that I think can really help people. So one of the things is that we get really good at talking about what it is that we do as a company. Meaning, whatever it is we're selling, we're really good at describing all the little nits and all the little details of what it does. What many people struggle with is if I ask them, so if we asked your client, what problems does this solve for them, what would they say? Most sellers will start to describe what their product does. So for example, if it was a large software company, let's say it was a CRM company, let's say it's like Salesforce, and you said, well, so what would your clients complain about? They would likely say, well, they want to have a single place where they can track all their leads, and they want to have integration with email, and they want to have activities and reporting. It's like, no, you just described your product. What's the problem that it solves? So we use a term called the elevator rant. So everyone knows this idea of an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
The elevator rant is the upside down version of the elevator pitch. So the elevator rant is, let's say you get on the elevator, it's just you. Right before the doors close, someone sticks their arm in, the doors spring open. 2 people representing your ideal client get on the elevator. For the ride up to, let's say, the 20th floor, they complain to one another about something that when you hear it, you think, man, no one's better at solving this than we are. What would it sound like in their words that they would complain about that tells you can help them? So if I was a CRM package like Salesforce, what they'd be complaining about is, man, I'm sick and tired of us forgetting to follow up on key opportunities because it just didn't get presented to us. I'm tired of not knowing that customer service just had an interaction with these people who I'm calling about a new deal. I didn't know something went sideways. I'm sick and tired of when an employee leaves, we feel like all their institutional knowledge went out the door with them. Those are the types of things that would be their rants that, guess what? They never mention the term CRM. They're just complaining about things that are impacting their business that they would like to solve.
How would you, that's really good advice. And I kind of want to go back to what you mentioned before, given our listenership is going to be that small to medium-sized business entrepreneur. I'm a big fan of lean. Like I love keeping it lean as possible, whether it's beef for a company, like lean is big. But what, you have all the experience on many levels, right? And different kind of sizes of businesses. What's your expert opinion on lean or scale, bring in more people scale, and then cookie cutter that process? What are your thoughts?
So my thought is this, is that for a lot of businesses, they start to have some success. And it's usually the entrepreneur or the founder who has the relationships, has the credibility, and then what happens is they hire a bunch of salespeople. They say, "Oh, we're going to scale." So now I'm going to basically bring in a bunch of salespeople. They're going to go out and make this happen. And the first thing the entrepreneur usually says is, "Oh, these people suck. I'm better than they are." And the reality is that having been in their shoes, I know that there are some intangibles that I have as the CEO, because guess what? As a CEO, when I say something, the client says, "Well, I can hold this guy accountable." The salesperson, they don't necessarily know they can trust. So one of the keys is that you have to be able to articulate very well those problems you solve and for whom. Because if your messaging isn't clear, if your positioning isn't clear, then you're sending people out and it's kind of a muddy message. So if I take a message that 0 to 10 resonates at a 4, and now I amplify it with more people, I still have a message that's a 4, and maybe since other people are telling it it's a 3, I'm just telling more of it. Now, if instead what I can do is I can say, how do I get this message to an 8, 9, or 10? How do I help my clients instantly understand why we're better than somebody else? Let me test that, and now I'm going to bring on 2 sales reps. I always say bring on 2, not 1, because if 1 isn't effective, you don't know if it's just your message didn't work, it's not them. If there's 2, then if one outperforms the other, you have a sense of, okay, did I onboard them differently? Did they just have different skills? So I'm always a big fan of adding in 2s. It's kind of like Noah and the Ark. So
absolutely.
So the idea is that then we want to have that message really tight. There are clients of mine who for years sold things, and their big complaint was, man, we're so much better than our competitors, but our clients confuse our stuff with their stuff. And I'm sure you have listeners who struggle with that, where they say, man, we're the premium provider. We provide stuff with this really high level. These other people are bottom feeders, and our clients compare us to them. And what we have to recognize is that when that happens, it's not the client's fault. It is our fault as the seller. And so when that happens, we need to make it clear to them how we're different from other people. And there's a concept I talk about that if we have time for, I can get into, called the client vision pyramid, that helps us demonstrate how we're different from other people.
We're going to dive into our guests' experiences in business and life after this quick message. Life Nation, are you struggling with growing your business and hitting goals? Or are you over the 9-to-5 grind, finally ready to take the dive into entrepreneurship? What are you waiting for? Go to michaelivas.com to set up a free, no obligation coaching call today. That's MIKEOLIVAS.com. I can help you. It may be the best call you've ever made. Awesome. So, and if we do, I'd love to jump in there. In terms of the businesses that, if you were to say there was some consistencies on what you see on a high level, what would that be like? Is there like, it's always for example, the message that we're sending out, we're not keeping it consistent and or tight, like you mentioned. What do you feel like some of those, from a sales perspective, I believe here, what would be some of those consistencies that you see in whether a big or small company in sales?
This is going to sound really funny, because whether it's big or small, it's the same stuff, and it's going to sound painfully honest or painfully simple, and it happens to be the honest truth, which is there are 2 aspects. One is the messaging that makes it really clear about why people need what you do. For example, on my website, I have a page titled Problems We Solve. It's the single most trafficked page on my site other than the homepage. And for my clients, I have a page titled Problems We Solve. It's the most trafficked page on their site, because when we've done this research with over 10,000 executives and how they make and approve decisions, the first question they ask about something is, what problem does this solve for us, or why do we need it? So instead of saying about us or here are our products, if you talk about here are the problems we solve, you'll be amazed that becomes one of the most trafficked pages on your site, because now you're talking about things from the client's perspective. The biggest thing, however, that moves the needle in terms of performance is repetition and practice. So, the top athletes in the world, they're the best athletes. Do they practice and train more or less than average athletes?
A lot more, definitely.
A lot more. Okay. The top musicians in the world, they're the best. Do they practice more or less? Right. They practice more.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
More.
But you'd say to salespeople, how often do you practice? They say, no, man, I'm really good. I don't need to practice. Okay. So the top performing athletes, musicians, actors, any field, they practice and rehearse more than their inferior peers. But somehow in sales, people think they don't have to. And a lot of that comes down to people don't know how to practice. So it feels like it's pointless. But the companies that I see who outperform the other ones, when I talk to their leaders, whether it's someone who's a VP of sales, whether it's a CEO, whether it's a chief revenue officer, and I say, man, you guys are doing great. What are you doing that's really helping? They say, we practice an hour a week and it's non-negotiable. Every single person has to practice an hour a week. There are no exceptions. And it's funny because when I share those examples, people say, wow, that's great. And I said, so how many weeks a year do you think they practice? And people say, oh, probably like 30 or 40. I said, no, I just told you they practice every single week. It's not, well, most weeks, well, so when it's convenient. And what happens is with their teams, they say, look, if you can't make the regular scheduled practice time, then you need to coordinate with someone else on the team. And part of your weekly responsibility is reporting back to management that says, yes, we did it. And the funny part is I've got a client of mine, we've got a case study on samesideselling.com about this company where they went from 20% of their team to 95% of their team hitting their numbers within a year.
Wow.
And it's funny because they had one business unit that just wasn't really killing it. And I said, well, what's different? They said, I don't know. We can't figure it out. And I said, well, how often are they using improv? It's the term we use for practice called same side improv. I said, how often are they doing that? He says, well, for the first 6 months, they were really doing it. And then, I don't know if they're still doing it. I said, okay, well, when do you start seeing a difference in performance? Well, it wasn't at the 6 month mark. It was probably like at 7 or 8 months. Okay, so about 30 to 60 days after you stop practicing, that group's performance fell off. Yeah. And then, we both laughed about it like, yeah, duh, now it's obvious. But at the time, and what they said was, well, we were just killing it. So we didn't think we needed to practice anymore. Jeez. Imagine if like a top baseball player, like the guy's leading the league in hitting, and then all of a sudden the second half of the season dies out and they go, what's different? I just didn't feel I needed to practice anymore. Like would all think they were crazy.
Yep. No, it goes back from a practice standpoint, like you talk about, like even sports analogies, it's fundamentals. Like you do not stop fundamentals. And like you said, you're right. It's ridiculously easy to think, but what's easy to do is also doesn't mean that it just gets done. It's easy not to do. It's also easy not to do. Right. And so how do practice, when you talked about practice, are we talking about, for example, if someone's listening here and saying, wow, my sale, I don't think we've ever practiced. In fact, the reality of it is most companies are practicing with live leads. And that's why their closing ratio is such crap sometimes. Right. And Believe me, I've been there. Right. And I've seen our closing ratio just be less than like 3%. And I just want to pull my hair out. Like, why? But now you look at like, okay, the scripts weren't done correctly. We're not recording calls. We're not looking quality. But then again, it's more, I look at this as a very cool angle for some people listening to say, why aren't you improving? Well, probably both sides, right? One's the client, one's the salesperson. Then you switch it up. What'd you say?
So in the same side improv game, and keep in mind, if people search for same side improv,
okay,
you'll see something you can buy. You don't need to do that. We have a digital version that's online that right now people can access for free. And the idea behind it is that there are 3 characters in each round of improv. There's the salesperson, there's the customer/prospect, and there's an observer. The observer is the person who learns the most in each session because they're not in the moment. They get to see what's going on. And then so what we do is we have these cards we call the secret cards. There are about 20 of them. And there are things like, and this is the customer picks these, and it's things like, you're afraid to lose control or headcount. You don't trust vendors. You're afraid to show ignorance. There's a whole bunch of them. And so in the digital version, it shuffles through and presents 3 cards. You can turn over 1, you can turn over all 3, whatever you want. And then as the customer, you play that role. So what happens is at each interaction, you're getting different information and it's a different experience each time. So it's not like Groundhog Day. If you and I improv and you play the same character every time, I would only get better at selling to that character. But by changing these variables each time, you develop skills. And what happens is you'll be in a meeting with a prospect and the prospect will either say something or ask a question. And you're thinking, I know which secret card they have. Only they don't get dealt cards, but you're now starting to develop a habit that says, when I see this type of behavior, it usually means they have this attribute. So it might be they're just trying to leverage their existing vendor. And so
Right.
that's one side. The other side is there are fundamental skills that we teach in the Same Side Selling Academy and in these immersion programs I do that are things like, how do you set up a meeting properly? How do you deal with pricing pressure? There are 2 or 3 different ways to do that. How do we make sure that we're disarming the situation so the client doesn't think that we're just there to sell something? And so in the improv game that we have, there are 2 different sets. So there's one which is these secret cards. There's this other one that's more like, to your point, the fundamentals, that says, okay, so now how do you disarm early in the conversation? That exercise might last 2 minutes, but it's just getting good at early on. And what disarm sounds like, since your audience may not be familiar with it, would be something along the lines of, if you called me and said, hey, Ian, I love that you can help my company. I've heard all these great things. The first thing I would say to you is, hey, I'm really flattered. I don't yet know enough about your situation to know if I can even help yet. Would you mind if I ask you some questions? Because I don't want to waste your time if I can't help. And it's being brutally honest that says, I don't know if I can help you or not. Now, people think that's some, Jedi mind trick. The reality is that half the time someone even calls me for help, they're not the right fit and I can't help them. And so having that humility up front opens it up to an honest conversation where the client / prospect now says, you know what? I can be honest with this person because they've even acknowledged that maybe they can't help me, as opposed to stereotypically, what does a salesperson say? Oh, we are the best for you. What do you need again? And it just seems totally disingenuous.
Right. No, I'm with you there. There's, is it a luxury to be in a position where I'm in the same position? Sometimes I guess I'm happy and I'm very blessed to be like, I can't just take on everybody as a business coach. And I wouldn't anyways, right? Because the value wouldn't be as big if I did. And my time, of course, needs to be focused on other companies just like you. You're able to now focus on helping others because I think you get an awesome return on that, just not from a monetary standpoint, because I know personally it feels really good. It's awesome to really help and see other people get the business game and understand it more and more, even if getting them to that next level. But you're right. I might take 8 to 10 clients on tops, and then sometimes I don't at all. But they still get a lot of value out of these couple of calls I give them, right? And I think that's important. But when you talk about the training side, really quick, and I wanted to go back to that before. One other question, or a couple other questions, is going to be: do you feel the improv? Is there some statistical data there where it shows? I'm just thinking out loud. Does that ramp up that salesperson's success a lot faster than not doing that, right? Like I can imagine, like they're getting everything thrown at them.
It's night and day. It's night and day.
So
it's night and day, because here's the thing. It's not even like we're saying, oh, you got to do this for 2 hours a day. So you think about it, in Outliers, Gladwell talks about 10,000 hours to develop mastery, which is 20 hours a week for 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are we saying? We're saying 1 hour a week. And guess what? Here's the benefit. Most of your competitors are averaging 0 hours per week. So if you just practice an hour a week, specific scenarios, you're head and shoulders above other people. And it's funny because the 2 pieces of pushback I get initially is, oh man, I don't think we have an hour a week. And I say, okay, if you got really good at this, do you think it would save you an hour a week in productivity? Yeah, it's a good point. So that happens very quickly. The other thing I want to comment on is you mentioned, well, we have the luxury of not necessarily needing the business so we can walk away from stuff. And what I want to challenge your listeners with is this. When you have taken on a client who's not a good fit, when you have taken on a client who you're not likely to deliver the results that they need, in hindsight, was it a good decision? And the answer almost always is no.
You're right.
That person becomes the bane of your existence. You get sucked into the vortex of evil, and you think to yourself, man, I wish I never had this client.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you're like, oh, but I need that $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, 500, whatever the number is. And you don't realize that, guess what? If they're not a fit, they're not a fit.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I want to definitely kind of go, what I said earlier was definitely a high level cost analysis, bringing in business just to bring in business. No, you're absolutely right, man. Like don't do that, because you're right. That's going to be the toughest and hardest client to deal with. The one that's just negotiating everything and just nitpicking everything, ends up being the hardest one to work with. You're right.
And they're never satisfied, because guess what?
Right.
You had no business being there. You know what? It would be analogous to, man, I got this problem with my elbow. My dentist says he can take a look. Right? It's like, you wouldn't go to your dentist if you got an elbow problem, but it's like, well, no, I went to medical school. And you're like, Yeah, okay. And next thing you know, 8 weeks later, your elbow's still bothering you. And he's like, well, I don't know. And like, you paid him, so what's he going to do? And it's like, you're not happy as a patient. He's not happy as a dentist. And he's thinking, man, I should have just focused on teeth. It's the same thing in business. It's just, we start to get this scarcity mindset and we make silly decisions.
Ian, you've given us some really good sound bombs here. I want to finish off by making sure that people know where to find you. And then I have one last parting question.
Perfect. So on Twitter, it's Ian Altman, LinkedIn, Ian Altman, ianaltman.com. That'll get you to everything. So if you go to ianaltman.com, that gets you to everything. There's a ton of free content on my site, and you don't have to sign up in order to get it. We send a newsletter about once a month. If people want to subscribe to that, God bless. We don't hit you with spam. It's just, here are videos that I've got. So you'll see my videos on LinkedIn and on YouTube and all over the place. And of course, the Same Side Selling book is probably at airport bookstores and everywhere that books are sold or awesome. Copyright infringed or whatever.
Okay. I hope not. Well, yeah, or you could just Google Ian Altman and see the first, I think, 10 pages are probably all going to be there with them, and articles. And again,
it could be
just a lot of info and knowledge. Thank you. Out of all of your successes and failures in business and in life, a little bit here, how those merge, what is the one piece of pardon advice that you give to the entrepreneur world out there?
You know what? And we touched on this earlier. Make sure that you know unequivocally what problems you solve for people and what the likely outcome is that you deliver for them. Because if you can articulate that, if someone understands, here's the problem they solve for me and why it matters, and here's the likely outcome if I work with them, then you'll never feel like you're selling a day in your life. You'll just be solving challenges for people. And your clients don't think, like, for example, when I get together with my clients, they fight me because they want to take me to dinner because they're appreciative for what I did for them. And it doesn't mean I'm not appreciative for them,
right?
But it doesn't feel like a client-vendor relationship. It's more like, hey, this is my ally who helped me get there. And every one of your listeners can achieve that same level of respect from their customers.
Awesome. Everyone jump on ianaltman.com, Google it, follow him. He has a lot of great knowledge in there, and grab that book so you can start. I would definitely start with that improv world. That sounds amazing to ramp up these salespeople. Thanks so much for your time, Ian.
Cool. You bet. Thanks, Mike.
Life Nation, you got to remember that in order for things to change, you must change. And in order for things to get better, you must get better. You just got better by hanging out with me, Michael Lipas, and the Business and Life Nation. So come back tomorrow because I'm here dropping sound bombs 7 days a week, baby. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so you can take action and execute. See you tomorrow.